Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here today. So I wanted to say before we start that please submit your questions, but I'm assuming you already know that, that at the end of the panel there will be a Q&A section. And I would especially like to thank our panelists here today. So on my right we have Stanislav Gusakov. He is a senior software engineer at Microsoft currently. He has a lot of valuable experience as a software architect. And he has also worked during his career at a lot of different companies. So he has had the opportunity to see how different companies approach software development. Next up, we have Tanel Kosk. As already mentioned, he's the CTO and co-founder of Singleton, where I also happen to work. And Tanel has a lot of experience with different programming languages. And actually around 10 years ago, he even taught a course on Ruby on Rails at Tartu University. So maybe there are some of his old students here. And our third panelist today is Mark Cowan. He is a senior data engineer at Bolt. He has been working on automating machine learning pipelines and optimizing the serving of machine learning models. But Mark also has a fair amount of experience writing software for satellites and writing flight software. And something that all of our three panelists have in common is that they have a lot of experience mentoring and training other developers. So let's hope that we can learn something from them today. And the topic today is static versus scripting programming languages. This is a fairly hazy topic, it turns out, but the things that we will be discussing are dynamic and static typing, weak and strong typing, and also using compilers and using interpreters. This decision, or rather the decision of what technologies to use for a project, is something that many developers have to face sooner or later. So hopefully today you will get some tips and tricks on how to choose and maybe a better understanding of the main things you need to know before making the decision. So first up, I would like to ask, why do you think that historically this topic has caused so much emotion and it has been argued over for so long? And the first question I would direct to Stanislav.
All right. In my opinion, the initial phrasing of the topic is static scripting programming languages, and in the beginning it was scripting versus programming languages. It doesn't really make much sense in modern times. If you go back like 15 years, yeah, you could say that Lua was a scripting language because it was interpreted and dynamically typed with very, very loose typing. And the C++ was a programming language because it was machine compiled and it was a strongly typed language. But now it doesn't really make sense. Take, for example, Python. Is Python a scripting language? Maybe, but everybody knows that Python is a programming language. Yes, it's a dynamic language, and it's strongly typed, quite strongly typed languages. So I think that instead of discussing static versus scripting languages, it would make more sense to talk about where a language could fit into the spectrum of being static versus dynamic in terms of typing, and in terms of also typing, if it's strict or more loose typing, because you can have languages on the part of the dynamic languages that are both weaker and stronger, and the same for the languages on the static side.
Do we have any comments on that from our other panelists?
Yeah. Can everyone hear? Great. Yeah, so for example, C# typically is as a compiled language, but you can also use C# for scripting. I have in the past. Similar with Pascal. I've written things before which used Pascal as a scripting language to automate stuff. So I think it comes down to more of whether you can just write code and hit run, or to some extent, or whether you have to pass it through something else first. And even that is a bit of a hazy issue because there are some environments where your code, like running it, will compile on the fly. You can actually do that with C, and I have done this in the past, where you can embed a bash script at the start of a C file to make it self-compiling. Never do this in production. So yeah, but yeah, the topic of typing certainly seems like a more interesting one, which will probably, the difference there will probably go back to the original difference between scripting and programming languages in terms of applications.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
you may comment.
Yeah, you mentioned compiling, but I think in modern time, even arguing compiling or interpreting the language is becoming less and less relevant. How many compiled languages you know, the modern one? Pretty much two, C++ and Swift. Okay, maybe Rust. Okay, go. But
Assembly.
how many truly interpreted languages modern you know now? It's pretty much only JavaScript that is truly interpreted. And everything rest is somewhere in the middle. You have a JIT compiler or a virtual machine that consumes the bytecode and then either interprets it or compiles to the machine code natively.
Yeah, obviously SQL as well.
But why does it even matter what we pick? Maybe Tanel, you can tell us why should I care as a developer? I need to do a project.
I don't know why it matters so much. It's been my personal experience since I've been mostly during my career been on the script kiddie side. And I have lots of discussions with people who saying that you have to use types and typing, otherwise your code is no good. You will make tremendous mistakes and everything will fall apart. Which I don't agree with, actually, from my experience. But the problem is that I actually haven't been able to defend myself like fully to the end, and others haven't convinced me either. And up to the point where actually in some companies I've had people leaving because they don't, the languages or environments that we use, they are not mature enough or big enough for and they leave the company because they think that our solutions or approaches are like wrong. Basically, but I don't know. I know that there has been a lot, but and I think it's a lot up to personal preference also, like how do you like to think and what do you expect from your tools and how, yes, something like that.
Thank you. I would direct basically the same question, Mark, to you as well.
Yes, so on that I would say that you always have types. The only question is whether you test them at development time or runtime. So yeah, whether you're getting compiler errors or whether you're getting, say, errors from Pywrite or MyPy, in the case of Python, which doesn't obviously check types early by itself. So whether you're getting them during development time in CI or whether you're only finding type errors in production, which could have been solved earlier with, even with better tooling on the same language. For example, type checkers in Python nowadays. So types are always there. Even in assembly, you have like types, you have different register types, different widths.
Okay, that's an interesting point, but me as a, let's say, just a developer who wants to do a project, I still don't know what to pick and why. Why does it matter?
So you pick the right tool for the job, and that doesn't come down to typing. It comes down to what people are familiar with and what job you're trying to solve. For example, a recent project in my spare time, I've been working with microcontrollers, so obviously TypeScript is not a solution there because these things have 900 bytes of RAM. C and Rust and assembly are the only options there, or in the case of this micro, only C and assembly. And whereas, let's say I was now developing the cloud services to work with this micro, I would absolutely be using something like Node or Java for that. Because I'm familiar with them, even though Golang might be a better choice according to one of my friends, because I'm not familiar with Golang. So it's down to best tool for the job, and that's not something that depends on the job. It's not something that can be decided academically.
Thank you. I think we will have a little bit of a case study later, so we can discuss it in more detail as well. I also had one question to Stanislav. Do you think it would be possible to create a programming language that would work for every case?
No, there is nothing universal. Even when Java says, hey, Java runs everywhere, no, it doesn't.
The C.
But what stops us from creating such a language? What would stop us from creating such a language? Let's say it does not exist today, but
I think it's different kind of runtimes where the language should run. Should the executable run in microcontrollers, like was mentioned? Should it be run in different operating system? Should it be accessible for learning? And how widespread I wanted the language to be.
Thank you.
I think the correct answer was use the correct language for the job.
Yeah. Like
Thank you.
Everything, pretty much everything could be done in C, but there's a reason why most of it isn't.
Okay, but let's try to find maybe some case. Tanel, can you maybe think of a case in your past where you've had to put a lot of thought into what technologies to use, what languages to use?
Sure, like every project. I starts from there. No, not starts, but goes there. But I think I had recently I had a very illustrative example of choosing the technologies. We started a small project, startup code, something like that. And there were lots of discussions, like should we use, it was really TypeScript, no TypeScript, should the backend be something typed, or we could use something really lean and more flexible. And all the arguments were like, all the quality ones, like out of the book, all the benefits that you get from static typing and stuff like that. And I gave up on that. So I said, okay, let's do it like that. And small team, me on the back end, other guy in the front end. Later it grew a little bit, but he started off with the front end thing and used TypeScript and all other I would say complicated tools, and the code was buggy still. It was like types might have been okay, but business logic and stuff didn't work. And he wasn't able to fix it. And long story short, he gave up and we had to continue. And then our team members took over the front end part, tried, mingled with that a lot of time. No luck, still. Bugs, they didn't understand what's going on. Then we dropped the TypeScript, wrote no types, just JavaScript-based basic application. And I did that. I have experience with front ends, and then I gave it to those two other developers who don't have experience with front end at all, but they otherwise are developers. And from that point on, I think since we dropped the types and other let's say little advanced concepts from the code, and just the code was left, they were actually able to pick up all the the work and are still like doing that. And now we have reached the point where we are pushing our product to the clients. Otherwise, I think we would have been stuck because we had no human resources to actually finish the product. So I think that's like illustrative example of if you choose the simpler tool, you actually can build something instead of like doing it maybe more properly, but not going anywhere at all.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned here that TypeScript was the more difficult tool. So I would like to hear other people's thoughts on this. For example, we could discuss JavaScript versus TypeScript. So Stanislav, would you consider one to be more complicated than the other?
No, I think from my perspective, TypeScript is easier. It's more user-friendly to use, and it's much more easier to onboard new team members to the TypeScript project than to the pure JavaScript project. Also, when I work on a bigger project, I found out that working with the TypeScript-based projects, be it Angular-based or React-based, are easier due to how the language works, due to how the language is structured, and yeah.
Self-documenting to some extent.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think TypeScript is a winner there.
Just wanted to ask the same question for Mark, but I already saw you nodding there, so...
Yeah, I've been writing JavaScript since the 90s, and I haven't written any plain JavaScript for quite a few years now, since TypeScript became more kind of widely accepted. On the same time, actually, last night I stayed with a friend in Tartu who, his team in the company he works for, they started something in JavaScript. Somebody joined the team who said, let's migrate this to TypeScript, so they did. Then that person left, more JavaScript people came, they kind of migrated it back to JavaScript, and now they're rewriting it in Golang. And the lesson here isn't so much JavaScript versus TypeScript, but it's that a bad decision will be better than having no decision, because they've now written everything 3 times at least. But JavaScript versus TypeScript, it's, do I want to find bugs when I'm writing the code, or do I want to find it in production? And in the past, when I've been working with satellites and nuclear devices, you really want to find it early rather than in production. Patching satellites is difficult.
Okay, thank you. Tanel, you have a...
Yeah, I have a question, like how do you feel about the learning curve of JavaScript versus TypeScript, for example? Like if the quite new to programming comes to the world?
So, yeah, from my experience, it is much easier to onboard any new joiner to the team if he has any knowledge of any object-oriented language like Java, C#, into the TypeScript project, because how similar those are in terms of the syntax, in terms of how the structure works. So yeah.
I'd say that on Bolt, a lot of engineers we hire at Bolt have no background in TypeScript, and our backend is exclusively TypeScript. When I joined, even the data science stuff was TypeScript, although thankfully thankfully Python was eventually allowed. The last remnants of the TypeScript data science models are about to die off. Yeah, we hire people with like C++ backgrounds, Java, C#, things like that, and TypeScript. We don't require them to have ever seen TypeScript before, because you can pick it up so easily. As for people who are new to programming, yeah, types are complicated, it's harder to understand. So for someone who's new to programming, just learning, like my wife right now, yeah, it's nice to start with something like JavaScript or Basic or Python, but once you want to start building big things that scale and that can be maintained in a team, where people are slowly joining and leaving the team and the original people aren't there eventually, yeah, that's where TypeScript becomes really nice, because you embed knowledge in the code instead of losing it when people leave.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you brought up the completely new developers as well, because there seem to be a lot of them coming to the market who don't maybe even have a university background. So
roughly, for the entire history of software development, I think roughly 50% of developers have less than 5 years of experience. So the number of developers has been growing exponentially.
okay, thank you. And let's maybe compare 2 different languages called Ruby and Java a bit as well, because I know that your combined experience with them is quite large. So maybe I would pick one of you who could talk more about why Java is better than Ruby. Stanislav, for example.
I have no experience in Groove, so I won't be the best person.
Okay. Yes. Tanel, maybe you should have some experience with both of them.
Why Java is better?
Java and Ruby, yeah.
And
or maybe you would like to argue why Ruby is better. But
I don't think it's better. I don't think. I think it depends on the purpose, as we read briefly here. Also, like if you are totally new people, I think Ruby is a lot easier to start off with, because you can. One of the key points of Ruby is actually make it simple for programmers. So it thinks that the developer of the language actually thinks that if the programming language resembles spoken language, English, it's like a benefit, and that's what Ruby has been after. So if people come to programming, they actually can more concentrate on the ideas and solutions that they're implementing, rather than fighting with types or interfaces or maybe more complicated software patterns. And also more flexible, thanks to the freedom of Ruby. I think those are the strong points of Ruby. But in Java, very simple. If you have bigger team and bigger project, Ruby is not very fantastic language.
Okay, thank you. And we already discussed a bit about junior developers or new developers, but what language do you think would be the most interesting to learn for a senior developer who already has experience? Stanislav, maybe you have some thoughts.
In terms of interest, I think pretty much everyone can jump on the Python learning bandwagon and learn Python. Python is an amazing language, and if you don't know it, it's quite easy to and fun to learn.
And it's also fun for senior developers.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want some more strictly typed, you can jump on Erlang, but it's a completely different level. So.
Okay, Mark, any thoughts?
Yes, so I'd say for the past 2 years I've mostly been working with Python, and so interesting probably isn't a word I would use to discuss it, at least not in a positive light. But languages, specifically the word interesting, languages that will be interesting for senior developers to learn. So languages that most senior developers don't really know or haven't used much but would find interesting. I mean, that's an easy one. It has to be Perl. I'm not saying practical, but interesting.
Yes, currently I was just more interested in the interesting part, not practical. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I thought I'd home in on the word interesting there, so yeah, definitely Perl for that.
Mm-hmm. And Tanel, I would like to ask you as well the same question.
What's interesting for seniors? Quite often functional programming is like something more exotic to most of us. Instead of Erlang, I would actually the Elixir on top of that. That's actually like I would say good choice. But problem with that is I don't find very much practical justification for choosing that language. So, but it's really interesting and fun to use, for example.
We'll explore that.
Sorry?
We'll explore that.
Who?
Elixir. Me?
But will you write a production system with that?
No.
Okay. I will try to leave some time for the Q&A section, but I had some separate questions here as well. Mark, previously, as we mentioned, you worked with mostly statically typed languages, and I understand that now you have far more experience with more dynamically typed languages. So,
yes, so
how was the switch?
well, with Python, one of the things I've been introducing actually is using Pyrite to add static type checking and as part of CI, as part of local development, integrating with IDEs so that the data scientists can actually have type checking while they're writing for Python. Because we have had a lot of bugs, thankfully generally picked up with the CI, where they were just due to type errors that could have been detected much earlier.
But did you find it easy to switch?
Yeah, I mean, Python is an easy language. That's one nice thing I'll say about it. It's an easy language and it's steadily improving over time. The switch, I've used Python a bit in the past for developing educational things as well. Like back when I was working with spacecraft, we were developing educational kits for universities to kind of see how to develop space missions and how to automate space procedures with kind of satellite kits that they could use in the lab. So not space-grade hardware, but very similar hardware. So they were developing missions, just not putting them in space. And a lot of the examples I gave there for the actual ground control were written in Python, because I knew that no matter what languages they learned, the students knew, or if they didn't know any language, they would pick it up quickly.
Okay, that's good to know. Tanel, actually, I had a question for you. If you were to start your own software company today, then what would be the languages that you would focus on at first?
We started with JavaScript or TypeScript or whatever you want when we did 6 years ago. That's one of the ways to go, and other would be, I think it depends a little bit what we want to build. If you want to, for example, address government projects mostly, then it would be Java. And but otherwise, I still think for smaller projects, you have to look the speed of development and also availability of developers and their skills and willing to learn stuff, like what they do want to learn. And there I think JavaScript, PHP and stuff like that might be more practical if you want to focus on maybe not so big clients, smaller clients with limited budgets and so on. So I would actually look not from the programmer angle, rather from the business person's angle. That means like I would choose a problem and then I would choose the tools.
Okay, thank you. This seems like something that you tend to agree on a lot. That's good. But actually I would like to ask essentially the same question from you, Stanislav. If you were to tomorrow start your own software company.
The question is, the software company about what? Doing what?
That would be up to you. But
Well, if the company would be writing some website or web-based project, I would definitely go with the TypeScript framework. And under it, I would use either React or maybe Angular or maybe something else, maybe Vue.js. But on top of that, I would definitely go with the TypeScript. If you're talking more about the backend language or a set of languages, I would probably go with the C# for the backend and maybe Python in some parts of the backends as well.
thank you. And we will try to leave at least 6 or 7 minutes for the audience's questions, but I would like to start the QA section by each of you asking each other one question. So we can start with Mark.
Okay. In your personal opinion, unrelated to your employer, what would you say is the worst language? Worst language.
In what terms?
Up to your interpretation. Technically, just how you feel about it, the community around it, however, which language pisses you off the most? which language, if you were given a choice between working in that language or going into non-technical management, you would choose non-technical management?
I think here either of you who wants to answer can answer.
I would answer PHP. No way I'm going to work with the PHP.
That's a very safe answer.
Tanel? You don't have to answer if you don't
Yeah,
want
I
to.
don't have
That's
answer
okay.
because I think bad languages actually don't. They are not used before they even reach that decision table.
Okay, thank you. Tanel, do you have any questions for our panelists?
Do you have then?
Yeah. What would you change in modern language to make it better? Let's say the Java or C#.
Ooh, I've not actually written much C# for 10 years. The language has changed a lot in that time from C# I've seen on Medium. So I'd have to say Java, but Java has been changing obviously every 6 months, and I haven't written much Java for like 3-4 years now either. So I'd say Java definitely user interface. C# in Microsoft Visual Studio, I can drag and drop, build a user interface, have two-way data binding in 5 minutes, bind it to a database over a network, whatever, bind it to backend services, like with entity framework and things like that. It's really simple, easy to do. Java, in the meantime, by the time the C# program is finished and you're already rolling out this internal tool to the company, the Java developer is still there fighting with Swing.
Thank you. Do we have any, I'm not even sure who I'm supposed to ask, do we have any questions from the audience?
We do.
Okay, maybe we can move on.
The first one is actually a statement. So the question, I guess, would be whether you agree or disagree. So the statement, quite an edgy one, is as follows. My hypothesis is we pick libraries and communities. Nobody cares about programming languages anymore.
Tanel, do you agree?
I do, I think. No, I think you do the language choice first, but frameworks and stuff like that, there it matters. The community and libraries more, like what's your general framework that you use.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Do you want to comment? Mark?
I agree. That's why I've spent the past 2 years working with a language that's fittingly named after a smooth-brained reptile. Sorry, I shouldn't rip on Python so much. No, it's a great language for its domain. But I use it because the infrastructure, the services, libraries are all there for it. And we did try doing these things with TypeScript, and it was painful.
Stanislav?
Yeah, I think you pick a set of features and a community and a set of extensions that the language provides. In the end, a language is just a tool to do a specific job.
Kaarel, what about yourself? Do you agree?
I tend to, yes, a bit. Definitely looking at the community a lot when doing the choice myself, so.
Okay.
Okay, another statement or question, what got more than one like, is I agree with the statement, choose the best tool for the job. However, what to do if your team disagrees about what the best tool for the job is? What do we think about that?
Let's start with Mark this time.
So this is an interesting one, I guess, because in my last company, I was mostly hiring inexperienced people because startup salaries, difficult to hire experienced people. And the nice thing about inexperienced people is that they don't have strong opinions on libraries or programming languages. You can, as long as you're willing to train them in it, they will use it. So for this, it depends on the team culture as well. Like maybe your choice just really is a bad decision, or maybe your team has a very bad culture issue where they can't collectively agree on things easily. So it could either you're wrong and you see what the team says, or you fire yourself or you fire the team. Yeah. If you think it's a really good idea and your team doesn't, and there's no way you convince each other otherwise, then you need to compromise or reform the team.
Thank you.
Have any others of you had this experience?
Yeah, if you have a good idea and you think it's good, prove it. Do a presentation, do a couple of demos, just show it, prove it that you have a point.
Okay. Then there are a couple of questions about Rust, and some have claimed that this is the best language at the moment, and perhaps it's the thing of the future. What do you think of it?
Tanel, any thoughts?
I think it is a thing for the future, but also like not for everything.
Could you specify what could it do better? What could it revolutionize?
I don't know much about it. More than it seems to be really good replacement for C on the, let's say, low-level stuff. For example, there it's like awesome thing. I don't see it coming to web frameworks very strongly yet. Maybe it won't. So in its domain, yes, future. No.
Okay. Do any others have predictions about Rust? Do you see this as a new big thing
So
taking off?
you go. I've talked enough.
So the best point about Rust is that Rust is fast, but it's got nothing else, in my opinion, for now. And it's language it's been evolving in the past months. And I think if it catches up with the community, because the community is what makes the language truly popular, it might become a thing. But seeing how the overall languages in the past 10 years has become more reliant on just-in-time compilers, the Rust being natively compiled might have some difficulties in that aspect, but we'll see.
Okay, so some cautious optimism.
Yes, I'd say for Rust, I've been wanting to use it in projects for ages. The only reason I'm not using it in my current embedded project is obscure microcontroller that Rust can't target. And Rust has value in higher level languages too. For example, multi-threading. Rust gives you a lot of safety guarantees for multi-threading, which you won't get in, say, Java, C#, C++. So Rust, say async as well. Rust has support for async, which from what I understand from a friend who used it, again, I've not used Rust, he says it's better than Python for that, which I feel he's slightly biased there, but I'm interested to find out for myself sometime. So yeah, Rust, I certainly see a good future for Rust.
Okay, something to look forward.
Another question, how does functional programming fit into the current discussion? When would it be the right tool for the job?
Anyone here use SQL? Yeah.
One hand, two hand, three hand, four hands.
Or
like
spreadsheets?
perhaps 10.
Yeah. Does anyone here work in a company that doesn't use any SQL or spreadsheets? Those are two functional programming environments. So yeah, functional programming is possibly the most popular form of programming around.
But the second part was, when would it be the right tool for the job? Like, can you compare situations? Or?
Working with data,
right,
generally,
right.
Because that's where functional programming, you model the flow of information rather than the flow of execution. So yeah, when you're working with data, that's when it really shines.
Okay. Do others agree?
Yeah, kinda. But in terms of functional programming, there are some functional programming aspects like the flow execution that's been integrated in other languages, like C#. You have LINQ. It's a super powerful tool that was borrowed pretty much from F#, that is functional programming language, and it's been integrated into C#. There are also the Stream API for Java languages that pretty much does the same. So I don't see the functional programming languages on their own, but as a part of some other language, as a subsystem set like this.
So Lodash for any JS devs here.
Yeah. And like, I think it's been a movement, like from objects to functional approach in front-end and JavaScript and TypeScript world as well. Like if you look at the evolution of React, for example, it went from classes to functions, for example. So it definitely affects how people solve problems.